Is the video gaming industry changing? Because we just saw the Bloober Team behind the Silent Hill 2 remake change their character designs to fit in line with a lot of the fans' criticism of some of their designs of one of the main characters, Maria, where people were criticizing her abnormally large head size and reduced chest size. And this was a complaint a lot of players had with the appearance of Maria, where she just didn't have the appeal and look of what we remembered of Silent Hill Maria, where she had this sultry, young, and temptress look that is all but gone in the remake. And I think that's the thing people have been complaining about the remake in general, where it felt like a soulless copy of some of the most deep and spacious dialogue that we saw in the original Silent Hill game. And I think that's the thing that is playing out in the character designs as well, where we saw just this lack of congruency between the original Silent Hill 2 model and the ones that we saw in the game. Where the Maria we saw in the Silent Hill original from 2001 just had more of a younger appearance and less of a wine appearance that we see in the current version, where it just doesn't feel like she has that Lady of the Night vibe that we were expecting. And I think that's the thing that people were frustrated with the redesign of Maria, where it didn't feel like an upgrade of the exact design, especially the clothes that were fitted to be more conservative rather than revealing, which was in part in line with the story and concept. And I think that's the thing that irritated the fans when it came to the production from the Bloober Team, who were more focused on changing a lot of the elements of the character to fit in line with more of a modern audience take of female conservative dress. And I think that's the thing that people were annoyed with, because this game already had a commentary on that and it was being stripped away to fit this politicized concept of what they see as something that is against their ideals. And I think that was the frustration with a lot of the character design that we saw, where we saw Angela kind of change in a way where she looks like a chubby teenager. And I understand they're trying to make her younger, but she doesn't look like the Angela that we saw in the original Silent Hill. I think that frustration with the character design played out with the overall lack of proportions between the characters' heads and their body sizes. And I think this was most prominent with Maria, where it felt like her head was gigantic, like she had a giant head. And I think that didn't match her shoulders and overall body proportions, and plus her small chest made it even more glaringly obvious that the people designing this character had no concept of bodily shapes and proportions. You see the difference from a game that came out 23 years ago that has proper body proportions, and it shows the lack of skills and design from the Bloober Team itself, where they don't even know the body proportions of a human being anymore, and people from 20 years ago had a better scope and idea of how to make those body proportions correct, because they actually have a decent model design from 2001. And I think that is the criticism that was leveled against the Silent Hill 2 remake that I think was the most credible. Everything else, I think, besides the acting, because I think the acting was way better in the 2001 one, that's the biggest issue I have with this game, that it's just absolutely soulless, and I think it doesn't really fit in line with what we saw in the previous iteration. It doesn't feel like a proper remake, because all of the passion and the dialogue and the scenes feel like they were stripped away and made empty. And I put that at the feet of the Bloober Team. And it makes sense that we're getting a lot of modifications to these characters that are trumping what we saw from the Bloober Team design, where we have modders making a better character design with a lot more skill and attention to detail to the remake. And that's the issue a lot of people are having with this remake. This doesn't feel like they put the attention to detail that a lot of modders put into the game itself, where we feel like we get a better representation of the game from people that are just online doing this on their spare time. And I think that's a big issue with the developers today, where we're having people online and just all over the world knowing how to make this game better than the developers that actually are getting paid for the job to produce this content. And just seeing some of the facial expressions that a lot of people are making with some of the mods, it's just like, oh, the soul is back. It really is the issue within the game, where the soul and kind of the dialogue doesn't have the passion that we saw earlier from the 2001 version. But regardless of that, to see the Bloober Team kind of look back at the game and make some alterations to some of the characters, it makes sense that, okay, they see an issue with the game itself. And I think they're actually listening to criticisms from the fan base, because they absolutely did do that with the giant-headed Marie, which was my biggest issue, where it just felt like her head was humongous, her chest size was reduced, as they do in all modern updates of games where they try to de-objectify, remove the femininity of the female character by all means. I think they did that to a certain extent with this game, and it affected the game in a negative way, at least for me, where it felt like they were trying too hard to do that. And I think that issue is what we're seeing now within the video game industry, where remakes are just there to make a permanent statement of what your modern day political ideals are nowadays. I think that happened slightly with Silent Hill 2. I don't think it's the biggest problem with Silent Hill 2 remake. I think it's okay for the most part. I just think it's soulless. It doesn't have the soul of the original one, and that's my main issue with it. Other than that, I don't think it has all these political progressive ideals inundated in it, because it is a remake of a classic game, and that's all it has to do. It has to follow the track of what was already established years ago. So there's not too many problems with the game, other than some of the body proportion issues and the lack of soul in the character dialogues not having the same impact that they had before. And I think seeing Maria here with this updated look, where her head is not as humongous, she still doesn't have that look of the original character, but you just gotta let it go. This is the character design that they like nowadays. Big chin, kind of wine on look. I think that's the situation we've been seeing all throughout the gaming industry, but it's good that they actually put some cleavage there, because it made no sense that the character is covered up, doesn't have cleavage, because that's the actual purpose for this character to be this way, because it's in context with the story. So to see them change that for this character was just utterly idiotic and showed their own overall ideology towards the game. I think most people didn't like that. It showed that they didn't understand the game itself, because they're reducing the impact of the story by changing the character's dress and design. I think that's essentially the annoyance that a lot of gamers have with this design, and to see them change it slightly, reduce her head size, I think that's a good step. Even though I don't think the design is still not that great, it still looks like a 45-year-old wine aunt, which it seems to be the standard nowadays in the video gaming industry and won't change apparently. But it's nice to see a team actually take steps to actually improve their game and listening to fan criticism. I know people are going to say this game sold millions of copies, it doesn't need to listen to the fan base, and yes, this game sold 1 million copies in its first week, and I think that's an amazing feat. A lot of people want to play the Silent Hill 2 remake, and I think that's something that cannot be denied. But this is a game that costs like $50 to $70 million to produce, and it needs to sell well above 1 million copies to actually have a successful and profitable project, and this is not that yet. It needs to continue to sell, and that's why we're seeing these improvements and this actually catering to the fans, because as you know, with Alan Wake 2 that sold 1 million copies in a week, it still hasn't become profitable, and it barely hit around the 2 million to 3 million mark, and it still isn't profitable. And I think this is what people have to keep in mind. Yeah, you have the hype in the beginning, you sold 1 million copies, but are you going to continue to sell copies? And I think that's the essential thing that we need to see here with Silent Hill 2, the remake. It needs to continue to sell copies. In order to do that, you may just have to listen to the fans, and I think that's a positive sign from the Bloober team, where they're actually listening to the fans, because it seems like they still want to make money, and I'm hoping that's the case. We heard them announce another project for a game coming out. That tells me that they really want to go on to the next project and produce something, because they feel like this is still riding on the wave of success, and the ride of success may stop if this game doesn't reach its profitability mark. And hopefully that is the case for Silent Hill 2, the remake. I hope for any development team to be a success that actually listens to the fan base, that actually looks at the mods that are coming out that are slightly better than their game. That is the key to success for any developer, to actually listen to the playing customer base, not the reviewers, not the people being paid by Konami and other giant developers like that. No, you got to listen to the fan base, because that's the key to your survival in the gaming industry today. And I think the modders are doing a great service to this game, because we're getting a lot of funny things. I love seeing some of the mods that have come out that are showing the non-regretful ending of Silent Hill 2, which people are having a fun time with. But you tell me your comments on this situation. What do you think about Silent Hill 2 remake kind of adjusting their overall character designs and listening to fan feedback? Do you think it's a positive thing, or do you think it's a negative thing? I think it's overall a positive thing. You tell me. You leave your comments. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.